So now it's time for us to go execute. And so Kurt Lewin, who's kind of like the human resources guru about this stuff, said what you need to do is unfreeze your organization. Basically, you have to break from past practices, institute a change, and then you have to refreeze it. And that's that people need to understand that these are the new norms. And so things that can be impediments to you are actually your own culture and all. So you have to take care of that. When you look at big companies, what they typically do is they tend to break up according to franchises. Like HP had printers and enterprise solutions and so on and so forth. And so with all these silos, though, there's a tendency to happen is that somebody emerges within those silos to bring about change in the digital area. And so what happens is that you start getting these pockets of excellence. And the leaders of these groups are called digital masters. They don't necessarily have to be IT people or digital people, but they need to be people who are experts on what your business is about. And so in order to unfreeze or bring about this change, you have to create an atmosphere that it's okay to try these things and experiment. What you find out about digital technology is it can't exist in a bubble. It spreads out. So naturally, all these different efforts are going to start to stitch together. And then what will happen is it integrates and it grows organically. However, it can't happen without executive management. And so when you look at the challenge in integration, because you're also integrating this with your customers too, it depends on your executive management. Customer facing. For example, do you make apps or something like that that's facing the customer? You're directly related to it. Or on the job refers to internally. What are you doing to make things better? And so your digital universe is going to touch all these points. And how do you integrate it together? And the crux of it is to remember that digital transportation is more of an organizational and managerial challenge. It's not a technology one. And so you still need, and it's kind of interesting because it's kind of a hybrid mode. You need top up and bottoms down. Like you need champions, which tends to be bottoms up. Some people emerge. But you still need your C-suite, your CTO, your CDO, your CIO, whatever you're calling your, now they're, instead of chief information officers, now it's about chief data officers also. They consider it to be that important. But people aren't going to believe this is real and spread it across the entire corporation unless the person at the top believes it too. You have to make sure everything's aligned with your mission, and that it'll diffuse out everywhere. And so here's capabilities, the things that you need for digital innovation and also for your business processes. You pretty much have seen this before. Now, in terms of leadership, these digital masters could actually be more than one person. Typically, in order to understand something, you need two domain people. One person expert in integrating the software and doing these systems, and the other person who actually knows something about the subject matter. You need to have discussions and debate and challenging each other. It's through ideas that it begins to flow through your organization. And for those who want to be digital masters, you have to find a way to outwit the critics. Speaking firsthand, it's difficult. And what it comes down to is, do you have the courage to do this? And as we saw from the previous slides, it's easy to just make excuses not to do something. But it's tough, because when you go out there and do this, you're making your neck very long. Your management is run top down, but that's mostly for order and support. This isn't about micromanaging. This is about distributed leadership. You are a knowledge organization. What you also need is what I refer to as shared vision. And this is something everyone in my departments had. And that's that they knew They may not have agreed with what we were doing, but everybody knew why we were doing what we were doing. Everybody knew what the challenges were. Everybody knew what the schedule was. All of a sudden now you don't have to have all these meetings because you have shared vision. And the way to create it is you can do it through education, reinforcement, consistency, and culture. And to give you an example of how do you create, well, how do you create culture? Gary Loveman, who's CEO of Harrah's Caesar Palace, decided to focus on analytics. He wanted to understand why customers were going to other casinos and how to steer them toward his. So Gary Loveman said that there are 3 ways to get fired from Caesars. 1, steal from us. 2, harass someone. Or 3, fail to have a control group when running an experiment. He's creating that mentality. Of course, I just find it funny that those are his 3 tenets, because it's a little like Pac-Man, Inky, Pinky, Dinky, and Clyde, or whatever it was. But your leaders define your culture. And examples are John Hancock. How did John Hancock diffuse outward from its silos outwards? And what they did is they started in marketing, and from marketing it diffused outwards. Volvo, they used to be a B2B company that basically they made cards and gave it off to somebody else. And now they realize, we need to own part of the customer. So now they call themselves a B2B and a B2C company. And who was the first people who are interested in expanding out like this? Trucks. That's what I mean by you have silos and pockets in a company. Now, when you think about McDonald's, people don't appreciate that innovation is at the very core of McDonald's. McDonald's was the one who made the first fast food restaurant. McDonald's was the one who was able to expand out to 2,000 franchises, or 5,000, or how many of them there are. But what happened is in 2015 their revenue fell, and they acted on it. They hired a CDO, and what they're working on now is what has McDonald's always been about: convenience. And so this is why now they have the kiosks inside, so you don't have to go to the trouble to order for someone. And that goes back to the slide that I had earlier. And that's that it's not about talking to people. It's about your convenience, in that you feel like the kiosk is there for you. And so in terms of leading, you can see early on, typically the IT people have the most say as you build up your infrastructure. And then it becomes the CEO's office. So the lessons you learn to create a better strategy is you have to know yourself and believe what you can become. Soften the entry, and that's that be able to help these people who are becoming the digital masters and plan the path through. And those are the ones who make it. Learn from others. Look at what other people do in the digital space to give you ideas. So you lower barriers. An example is, in terms of digital marketing and strategy, I talked about the storefronts before and how you can get into new international markets. The idea of always on, that has to do with the farmers that we talked about, and broad and agile. And that's that you can always find some way to be involved with your activity. And a good example is Nike. Nike wants to be involved in part of your everyday life. They want to expand beyond being just a shoe company.